Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Hack the Planet podcast, brought to you by Symbol Crash. We're here in the studio with several experienced, read old, hackers to talk about all of the problems in the world and possibly a solution or two. Although unlikely. Let's introduce our panel for today. We have Max. How are you doing, Max?
Pretty good.
We got Mitch.
I didn't sign up for all the problems, but we'll see what we can get through. Yeah, Mitch, by the way.
And we got Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin. Doing all right today.
And Dan.
What's up? It's Daniel.
And I'm Ben. Since we have 5 hackers in a room, we've got more than 12 opinions to contend with, and none of us have the time in our busy schedule to agree on a topic or do much editing. We're going to open up with opening rants on a topic of your choice. We'll start with Max. Max, you have what's grinding your gears this week?
So one of the things that's long irritated me is freaking crypto charlatans and companies that basically make their money in. They basically make their money by selling these sham products that use the air of crypto without actually ever publishing a white paper or anything for public peer review. I've seen this a number of times in consulting, and it's painful to watch these companies get suckered into agreements where they're using. One example was a very awful implementation of a white box quote-unquote crypto algorithm that had essentially the keys packed in to the source code of the object. So of course you can never reverse the source code of a program in order to extract keys. That's completely unfathomable. Of course we recommended against this, but that's definitely one of the most painful things that I've come across. There's a number of other situations where that comes up. You see this all the time in the cryptocurrency markets. It's completely painful. Just if it's not publicly peer reviewed, don't believe it. And even if it is publicly peer reviewed, there still could easily be problems. It's best to use well-known ciphers and libraries constructed by that are openly peer-reviewed. There's really no other solution for it, and that's about it.
Solid advice. Is a recurring topic. Hey, Mitch, what's up?
So that actually, we're talking about doing seg, which is a thing I like to do. That is really similar to some of the stuff that I've been thinking about recently, and it's sort of, when you look at that instance of a problem, what you essentially have is let me take a step back. How you think about a concept and a topic and the context around it is really important for what happens when groups of humans come together and build design solutions or products. And I think one of the roots that you're seeing here is sort of the continued advancement of sort of the idea of financializing these crypto concepts. There are, obviously utility to it, but there's also obviously it changes the way you think about problems, and it messes with some of the abstractions. And so one example of this that I saw recently is a group that actually seems to have some solid people on its staff and foundation that are looking to implement sort of an enterprisey blockchain version of zero-knowledge proofs. And there's a lot of utility there.
Those ZK snarks?
Yeah. But as I was reading their white paper, it wasn't here's our peer-reviewed algorithms and stuff. It was, here's what we're doing, and also we have this patent-pending technology to where you can take a larger proof and decompose it into smaller amounts of proofs that run on different worker nodes, and you can build up a proof. And the thing is, that's not really an innovation. That's just you've proven something recursively, which is what all proofs are, essentially. And so I was just reading this, and so this patent pending process, and I thought that was interesting. And then I went on the U.S. Patent Office, looked it up, and saw that they were also attempting to file for a patent that allows you to mix private entropy with encrypted public entropy to create new public entropy. And it could be perceived to be run on a computing device where the instructions could be conceived to be fetched out of memory and run on a general purpose computer. And that was the patent.
What?
And I was looking at the team of people, and one of the people on this foundation was Professor. I apologize, I don't have the person's name. Professor at MIT Electro Engineering and Computer Science, winner of the Turing Award, winner of the Gödel Award twice for co-inventing ZK snarks.
So some pretty hefty
right.
people.
And so it's great, but also you sort of have this weird financialization mixed in. And I just saw that and I was just imagining, Alan Turing sort of trying to have a contract dispute over who gets the IP over the Ultra machine after World War II. That's just what it feels like. And I actually don't blame people because, it's a way to have a stable living in the world, but
it sort of sounds like some of the old school cryptographers that actually know what they're doing got sort of pissed at all the ICOs that happened, and all these people who were using their work just got cashed out and made a bunch of money.
Yeah, so I don't know. And this sort of, I want to take it even a little more broad. And as we talk about, after there was something that happened at Black Hat this year where there was a talk that was apparently sponsored, and so there wasn't the same level of rigor applied to it. And then additionally, I've been seeing a lot of the same discussions, that you've seen over and over pop up again, how do companies make investments? Why is it that the investments that we're currently making don't correspond to returns? And I think it all sort of stems from the problem of, trying to think about this from a financialization perspective. How do we create the right financial incentives, which is something that you have to do. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I know some of you have other thoughts on this, but I'm just sort of thinking about the fact that there is sort of a scarcity of sort of resources, one of those being labor that can actually work through solving, problems in the general space of, mitigating and securing risk. How are you deploying those resources? I think that the financialization of the space is hidden from a lot of us, which is ultimately one of the fundamental questions of how do we get out of wherever we are right now. So that's just sort of my rant. I don't know what productive comes out of that, but it's just sort of something I've been mulling over.
Well, it's kind of it almost seems related to what they used to call crypto anarchy, which was sort of the idea that if people really wanted to use cryptography to protect their personal freedoms, they had to actually understand how to implement it themselves, and they had to sort of understand how it worked, so that they wouldn't be at the thrall of some corporation that is, controlling the technology. But at the same time, it's if you can't do it yourself, can you really rely on it, if your life is on the line? But that's that topic comes up a lot as well. For sure. You said one thing at the beginning I didn't quite catch. You said seg or sev?
Oh, seg, transition. If you're a stand-up comic, you want one joke to have good seg with another joke.
Ah, I see. Sorry.
Maybe it's a Midwestern accent. I'm mispronouncing it in a weird way or something.
I'm not hip with the jargon. These kids on my lawn. All right. Okay. Next up for opening rants, we have Justin.
Something that's been grinding my gears a decent bit lately is what I perceive, and coming from someone who doesn't currently directly work in the InfoSec industry, is the mediocrity in the industry, which also bleeds over to other aspects such as just software developers. When you find people who work in the industry but they view it as a 9-to-5 job and they go home and they don't have any side projects of their own. And trying to interact with these people or do projects with these people can be infuriating, particularly when you meet them and maybe they're open to the idea, and then after a while it becomes apparent that they don't want to spend their time on it. Yeah, so you guys probably have more experience dealing with these people than I do on a regular basis. It becomes frustrating after a while. These people, they again look at it as a 9-to-5 job. They have no desire to increase their skills or to be productive when they get home and work on projects, and that's been grinding my gears lately.
Yeah, I have. I've been interviewing a lot of entry level or kind of junior level security engineers, and I've been seeing a lot more like certificate holders. I think the OCSP, the Offensive Computing Certificate, and I've been surprised, shocked, saddened by the kind of the lack of foundational knowledge of people that go through these sort of red team pen test certificate programs and don't, for example, understand the fundamentals of TCP/IP networking or like the OSI stack. In fact, I had one of them not even know what TCP was, and I thought he was maybe trolling me, so I asked some follow-up questions, and so I said, he had gone through the whole OCSP and all of, they teach you a bunch of methods, like you see this service, you do this, you see this service, you do that, and they were all text stream protocols. So he had just somehow assumed that the whole internet was just text stream protocols. So I asked him, well, how, one computer can talk to multiple servers, right? So how does the traffic get routed? And it was like, it blew his mind. He was like, whoa, it's like they never covered that in the OCSP. And this is actually leading into my rant. So, hey, I'm Ben, and this is my opening rant. But I was looking at a paper from the Board of Education that said that the output of computer science graduates in this country peaked in 2002, and then there was a giant dip until 2015, where it came back up to 2002 levels. And this corresponds with a giant explosion in the internet age. Like a lot of the websites we're familiar with on the internet just came into existence in that time period. And that's a time period where the formerly highly educated computer science workforce that was kind of coming out of the 90s either started to retire or started to call in rich, and they had to backfill an exponentially larger number of technical positions to make this new web, and so they started dropping education requirements for developers. To the point that now the vast majority of developers work only in JavaScript, and you can qualify for that job with a 12-week training program. That's actually become very typical, and they're kind of, as Justin was sort of alluding to, they are attempting to go that way with some security jobs as well. But for DevOps or something like that, I don't think that's a problem. I think it's there was a giant drop off in formal training, and there was an exponential increase in demand, and the business has to do what it needs to do to scale. And I think part of but what we're really missing in the industry is what drove a lot of the tech industry through the 70s, so I've been told, the 80s and the 90s, which was just personal passion for technology, for figuring out all of the weird things you can do with it, that the hacker spirit, so to speak. And one of the things I'm hoping to achieve with this podcast is just to communicate some of the ethos and maybe later some of the skills but hopefully some of the passion from some of the older people in the industry to just really anyone. But hopefully some younger folks will come and backfill. But with this trend towards hiring exponentially more but less trained developers, I'm seeing an increased emotional cost on people working as security engineers, especially in-house for large companies, because the way companies have been scaling up with their less trained workforce, who presumably they introduce more bugs. They introduce robustness bugs, functional bugs, usability bugs, because those are what all of those classes you take in college are for. They're basically telling you these are the mistakes that have been made in the past, and this is why we don't do it that way anymore. And without that kind of foundational knowledge, people don't know any better. And they just introduce the same problems over and over that have already been seen in history. And the stress that has on the security engineer is as time passes, the bugs that we oversee the output of the developers of these companies, and as time passes, we're seeing the same bugs become more and more common, and they're stupider bugs, and they're older bugs, and they're bugs that don't excite us and don't interest us. And it's actually incredibly depressing to see the state of technology move backwards in terms of just basic quality and know-how. And people are designing convoluted systems that are way too complicated without and a lot of people say it's a combination of Dunning-Kruger and the Peter Principle, and we'll probably be spending more time on
Peter Principle?
So Dunning-Kruger is the tendency of people, the less they know about a topic, the more they assume they know percentage-wise, because they don't know what there is to know, so they assume they must know it all, right? So that is the paradoxical quality of know-nothing people to assume that they're very smart. The flip side of that is the imposter syndrome, which is people who know a lot about a particular topic have some inkling of what they don't know, and they actually often feel like they don't know anything, right? Which is why asking anybody to sort of self-report their knowledge is ridiculous unless you're trying to detect narcissists or idiots, because only narcissists or idiots will ever say they're a 10 out of 10 on anything, but that can be dangerous in a job interview, because going into a job interview as someone who doesn't like to talk about myself very much, I often remind myself, pretend to be a narcissist just for today.
You have to go for the interview.
Just for today, pretend you're a narcissist. And then it's like, all I do is talk about how great I am. And that seems to work a bit better, but I do feel uncomfortable. But just to back up a tick. So what I'm noticing with the security engineers working in the industry is that they're just getting despondent because the deltas they're seeing in the tech sector in terms of qualities, they're all going downhill. The bugs are getting more common. The bugs are getting stupider. Old bugs aren't going away as classes. No. And companies are only interested in getting compliance boxes checked. They're not actually interested often in drilling down and digging into technical debt, because a lot of them are just moving too fast for that to be a factor. Or they don't think it's important important enough to spend money on. Or the other thing that's common, I forgot to mention the Peter Principle. The other thing that's common is that their middle management is telling them that everything is fine. Because the secondary effects of not being able to hire people with CS degrees who actually know what the history of problems have been in tech, the secondary problem is that they all get promoted to their level of incompetence, which is what the Peter Principle says. It says that in any hierarchy, people get promoted until their output drops off, and then they don't get promoted anymore. But basically that means everyone is promoted until they can't hack it, and then that's where they stay, right? And so we're often looking at, as security engineers, we're often looking at management that is being that is confused or misinformed or not getting an accurate picture of what's going on from an increasingly undereducated developer core, and the security engineers are between that rock and that hard place, you know. And the thing that made the job fun in the first place is getting whittled away by just this endless sea of stupid bugs that somebody should never have, you know, gone into a review, you know. Yeah. And that dealing with that chaff often makes it more difficult to deal with more structural issues.
One of the fun things is figuring out a new puzzle, but if they're all the same puzzle.
Yes. And it's leading to this weird depression. And I'm seeing like a lot of my friends and coworkers literally just snap. And what it's reminding me of is they used to say in the 80s and 90s, you know, when the U.S. Post Office had hired a bunch of Vietnam vets, several of them snapped, and that was sort of one of the early waves of mass shootings in this country. They just showed up at work and shot a bunch of people, and that's where the term "going postal" came from, which actually I've discovered a lot of millennials don't know. Oh, really? Yeah, so going postal was literally because of postal workers shooting up places, and it came from that video game. No, the video game was a reference to that, but that era kind of ended at some point, and people forgot. But I remember from news coverage at the time, they had a bunch of psychologists trying to dig into like what was causing this wave, you know, of postal workers going, you know, just postal, and they definitely mentioned the PTSD, and a lot of them had been in the war. But one thing that came up repeatedly was the sense of futility, because the mail just kept coming, you know, and it was always the same, and it didn't matter what they did. You know, if they didn't show up at work, the mail came the same, you know, and it didn't matter how much mail they moved in a day, there was that much more mail tomorrow, you know, and if you look at like some of the Maslow hierarchy of human needs, you know, the sense of progress, the sense of moving forward, that things are getting better, is so baked in to feeling good as a human that our natural inclination is to assume that things always get better. And the real painful thing about having worked in the security industry for as long as I have is that I've seen things get worse. Just like they were getting better for a while, and then there was a sharp drop off, and a lot of it has to do with, I think, organizations having difficulty scaling, having difficulty balancing the development time with quality control and those types of concerns. But I guess the other thing I'd almost like to do with this podcast is I've been thinking of a less disgusting way of describing it as like a group hug for hackers, like the site Group Hug US. But if you ever looked at that site for even a couple of seconds, it was usually traumatizing. But rather than you know, going postal, you can give us a call at the hacker helpline and vent your spleen, and we'll have the number for that at the break. All right, and last but not least, our final opening rant. Daniel the Rant Master. Daniel the Rant Master, who I'm sure has a bunch of meta
thanks guys. Just
we're setting expectations.
Set the expectations as the highest for the listener. There's a lot of the topics that have been discussed today that just throw me off into so many directions. So I think I'm gonna start my rant with a story, and I'm gonna preface this with anyone who is familiar, who after listening to the story and think that it's about them. It's not. So I found myself at Hacker Summer Camp recently, and probably one of the side conversations that stuck out to me most was someone who had worked with me in the past, and they're in a position of leadership now. They're leading a team themselves, and they were kind of lamenting at some of what they felt were deficiencies in the experiences that they had under my leadership on the team. They were highlighting that, we find ourselves as a group not very exposed to tooling, that's creating some deficiencies in us, because the expectations that we're seeing more and more, and this is a service-oriented business, but the expectations that we're seeing more and more are aggressively constraining our time. And so we're getting into a situation where, you taught us how to do things, but we're in situations where we increasingly find we have to automate these things away, and we don't really feel exposed to all the tooling and automation options that we can use. And why I'm reciting this story is that, there were two ways I could have reacted to that story. One, obviously I could lament that I didn't properly prepare them for some of the work that they were leading into, but I actually leaned in. And the reason why I leaned in was this. That team and that individual, and what they were subsequently reassured of, is that they understood how those tools operate far more effectively than any of the individuals, as Ben was recently lamenting, could ever possibly explain. And that's the most important thing. That's the whole reason why I built the team that way. There are going to be tools that come and go. Open source projects that will be created by people with passion who subsequently fizzle out. But unless you understand the mechanics by which they were trying to automate it, you will never be able to use that tool to its full extent. And you will never be in a position in which you can identify a better tool to replace it or ways to augment it. You need to understand the fundamentals. It doesn't matter what business pressure is applying to you. Ultimately, the only thing that I viewed as a gap was I didn't educate them on how to identify tools in order to automate away work they already understood how to do. And that is a skill gap that I completely own. In the essence of ranting, I will single-handedly accept that failure, but I will never apologize for creating a team that teaches people how the technologies work, first and foremost, versus teaching them what tools they can take advantage of in order to expedite their workflow. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only right way to build a team. /rant.
Everyone had their thumbs up, but that doesn't work on a podcast.
Can't hear nodding.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
It's good.
I mean, one of my reactions from all of this is we have, the concerns about the amount of, passion and quality that people can bring, and like looking to go deeper into how to be effective versus sort of the burnout piece. And it's sort of a hard balance. And that's just sort of one of the contrasts I sort of pick up from the discussion.
Well, I think that the difficult thing with the difficult thing with the burnout piece, especially, is that the company can always hire more developers. So they can't always hire more security engineers. So at some point, they will find your point of burnout and then just try and keep you there. Because they want to get all this development done, and I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of discipline too. Like, where organizations have trouble choosing priorities and sort of realistically assessing what they can get done well enough in a particular period of time. And I think this sort of startup IPO culture has really contributed to that. One of the topics I was actually going to suggest bringing up, but I completely forgot until right now, was late stage capitalism. So I made some joke on IRC, like the only true anti-social network.
The original Slack?
Yeah, the original Slack. Discord minus the feds. Probably not. But so I made a joke in IRC the other day, and I was being old man cheeky, so I just started using hashtags at the end of jokes just this year. So I was like, is this how this works? Like hashtag late stage capitalism? And someone came back with, you mean hashtag end stage capitalism? And I was like, Actually, that's way better.
I was going to be the one to say it.
But it does, at a certain point, it seems like the center cannot hold or whatever. But on the other hand, if the economy's entirely make believe, if Facebook is really worth $60 billion or whatever they're saying, or all the valuations of these companies are insane, and then sometimes they go to zero within a couple of years, and sometimes they become even more insane. And if you think you could go and like liquidate one of those companies and get that much money out of them, you can't. It's all based on potential future vapor, right? So, on the one hand, it's not real, really. But on the other hand, it's like if everyone pretends it's real, it's kind of just the same thing.
It's effectively real.
Yeah, it's basically real. But
it's a shared hallucination.
Yeah.
Well, so there been people who talked about this. They called it commodity fetishism. Is one of the words.
What does that mean?
Go look it up on Urban Dictionary.
Isn't that like when you like just like get showered with when you make it rain?
Yes, that's exactly what it means.
Like just wasting a bunch of stuff you can buy on shelves.
I'm pretty sure.
Commodity fetishism.
None of these answers are correct, but I love all of them.
Oh, well, the other idea is like you take some kind of commodity like frozen orange concentrate and you put it on a fetish like a stick. And no, okay.
I'm pretty sure commodity fetishism is the branded butt plugs that either show Bitcoin or Ethereum, and then they vibrate based on the rate of the currency change on a daily model.
Oh, you could die on a Bitcoin one.
I like that answer best.
Ride the roller coaster.
Well, regardless of what's branded on it, it's if there's vulnerabilities that allow it to be accessed from the open network, then it's functionally the same threat model.
Yeah.
I saw a good talking connoisseur about that. You should go look it up.
Well,
about Blue Dildonics? My favorite technological term ever.
Teledildonics.
Well, Blue Dildonics, specifically Bluetooth.
Oh, Bluetooth. Wow.
Yeah, Bluetooth.
Oh, that is a combination of things.
So, does anyone have any other reactions to opening rants or anything else you want to cover?
So many things.
I
think we might need to save some of that for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one closing statement that I will throw out there just to be because I think it's very natural for everyone in the security community to overfit on the things that are dysfunctional and the things that don't work. And those are valid observations. They're real. There's a reason why we see things that are broken. It's because they're fucking broken. But I will say that as you zoom out and try to go more and more macro, you will see trends. You will see sine waves. You will see things that ebb and flow. I mean, especially for those of us who've been around long enough to see the problem statement get better and then get worse, right? There is a pendulum. It will swing. It may hurt for us to get to the point where it has to start swinging in the right direction again. But I think, I guess partially I hope that that's going to be soon, right? Like that maximizing shareholder value is actually not conducive to producing high quality software. And we'll start seeing the effects of what rapid prototyping actually yields as far as durable products in the near term.
All right. College radio can be summed up in 5 words. Dead air. Dead air. This is a strong bad joke. I gotta cut it. I think. That's a really good point. So hackers have a tendency to focus on the negative. It's sort of our defining characteristic and what we end up doing professionally.
It's what makes us useful.
It's what makes us useful. It's what makes us bizarrely well paid in some cases, and also in demand because most people can't deal with just being this negative all the time and not completely imploding. And I think that actually factors into why so many of us burn out or have stress conditions, or really have a hard time dealing with the sort of cognitive dissonance associated to, how we get our biosurvival tickets. But I think that hopefully by sort of talking through some of these issues in a more open forum, we can get some good feedback from our listeners, or maybe from some future guests or interviewees, about how to make some of these things better. And I know that I have some ideas around training. So I've been trying to run free hacking workshops in Seattle, where I'm based, through Symbol Crash. And I have a lot of other ideas for kind of how to maybe bring some of my passion for some of these topics to some people that might be coming from less traditional starting places. But with that, I think that wraps up the open rant portion of the program. I want to thank everybody on the panel. That was just excellent ranting. That was a choice rant right there. Hard rants. Stay tuned after the break for useful hacking tips from our panel. We're going to stop with the froofy abstract nonsense and give you some meat. All right. Stay tuned.
They demand meat.
Where's the beef? While we're taking a quick break, I have to plug some Symbol Crash stuff. Every fourth Friday of the month at 7 p.m. at the Prelude Institute on 4th Avenue in downtown Seattle, Symbol Crash runs a free, open-to-the-public hardware hacking training workshop. That's the fourth Friday of the month at 7 p.m. The details are on Meetup. Search for Symbol Crash. Symbol Crash is also running a paid training on post-exploitation and Golang tradecraft at HushCon on December 3rd through the 5th, entitled Building the Andromeda Strain. Find that on Eventbrite by searching for HushCon Training 2019, Building the Andromeda Strain.
And now for a word from our sponsors.
Do you or a loved one suffer from a hacking addiction? Wonder why your MIPS shellcode isn't executing? Ethical concerns about what to do with Trump's tax returns? Call the Hacker Helpline at 206-486-6272. Problem with your Tesla coil? Call 206-IT-NO-ARC. Or send an audio email to podcast@symbolcrash.com. That's symbol as in symbolic, not like the thing you hit with a stick.
And now for the thrilling conclusion of Game of Drones.
And we're back in the studio with our panel. For the next round of discussion, we're going to ask everyone for a useful piece of information or a learning aid for a hacker who's just starting out, or it could be something on a more advanced topic, a dealer's choice. All right, so does everyone remember their topic?
I think so.
Right. Well, let's go around the circle the same way. So we'll start with Max.
Hey! So I wanted to sort of follow up on Daniel's rant earlier. And so it's really one of the best ways, if you come across like a very cool tool that you like to use, to re-implement the methods that are used by that tool in your own language of choice, in order to really get to the bottom of how that tool is operating and dive into the RFCs, dive into the protocols, or whatever documentation for the protocols, in order to actually really thoroughly understand what is going on with these attacks that are in the tools. Because just knowing how to use a tool doesn't really actually give you an understanding, but like knowing, re-implementing it is, I mean, you have a guidebook, you know how it's supposed to work. You even have an example that is the tool itself. You can really get a thorough understanding, and even sometimes come up with new attacks that way. You can really drill down that information. I think that's my tip.
Oh yeah, I do that myself. Especially one example I can think of is Metasploit plugins. So I've rewritten a few Metasploit plugins in different languages because maybe they need to be deployed in a different environment. And in some cases, I've added functionality, which has opened up more potential targets to the same vulnerabilities. But there are definitely other examples where there's like really good reference code for something, and you get a lot of value from re-implementing it. Awesome. That's a great tip. Mitch, you ready?
Yeah, so on the topic of re-implementing things that have been done in the past, you can do the same thing with attacks. Famous attack you heard about at DEF CON. Go re-implement it, go rebuild it yourself. And one of the best guided sort of tutorial / educational opportunities for exploitations is the CryptoPals set of challenges. It's a set of cryptographic
Good.
operations that you start by building up in your language of choice, and then you compose those to build new crypto systems in naive ways, and then you attack those naive ways, and you sort of like rebuild the history of practical cryptography as you're going through the course. So highly recommend it. I've done it. I haven't done all of it. I need to do all of it because it's really an incredible resource. And my other tip is make sure that you are taking care of your mental health. So we talked about a lot of things in the previous segment, and I think part of what's helped me sort of be an effective processor of all this is my time that I've spent, with mental health professionals, counselors, psychiatrists. So definitely take advantage of the resources that you have, and if you find yourself not having those resources, speak up about it so we can know where to help direct resources if possible or if needed, because might as well. You got one brain. Might as well take care of it. That's my
Awesome.
my
Well,
piece.
that's two great tips. Hey, were you saying Crypto Pals or Crypto Palace?
Crypto Pals, as in like your buds, your friends, but PAL, like the television broadcast format.
It's really good. I highly recommend it. It's so good.
I will have to check that out. All right. Next up, Justin.
So I wanted to talk about the IP idle scan. Sometimes it's called the TCP idle scan, but technically it's reading the IP ID, which is hence the name. It can be useful in... I don't find a lot of people use it. I ask a lot of people about it, and I don't hear about people using it very much, but I found it to be a pretty neat tool, or a pretty neat type of scan. And basically, you're using a zombie host to probe other hosts on the network, which may or may not be accessible to you directly, and it could be connected to an internal network that you don't have access to, or it could be connected, to hosts that you don't want to probe directly. And the way that it works is that you send a send packet with a spoofed address to the zombie host, and the zombie host is going to send a send ACK to the target host, and since the target host didn't send the send in the first place, it's going to send a reset back. Now, a good proper zombie host is going to increment their IP ID by 1. So if you send your first packet from that, and then you send your third packet, and you see how much the IP ID has increased by. So if the port was closed, it's going to increase by 1 only, and if it increases by 2, then the port is open. If you want to make it appear that the scans are coming from an entirely different host than yourself, you can use that to spam that zombie host with lots of scans, and it's going to look like, for any network detection systems, it's going to look like the scans are coming from that zombie host. Conversely, if the computers you want to scan are on an internal network and you can't reach them directly, you can still probe for open ports by using the zombie host to communicate that has access to those internal boxes that you do not. I think it's a pretty cool way for it's very stealthy. And it allows you to often scan networks that you would not have access to if you're not whitelisted to talk to the internal network, but the zombie host is. So
It's an awesome way to enumerate a separate network.
Are there specific tools used for that? Or
Nmap has built-in functionality for that. The guy that originally came up with the attack wrote HPing 2.
Oh, so the guy that wrote HPing 2 came up with the attack?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the TCP idle scan.
Yeah.
So it's the dash little s capital I
Yes.
flag for Nmap. And you're hearing from
Some
there's
dogs
a dog
have entered,
attack happening here.
Dogs have entered the studio.
Yeah, we'll have to work on our perimeter. Well, in the spirit of re-implementing attacks yourself, the thing that I've noticed the most with younger security engineers is perhaps the entry-level jobs that they get encourage them to scan for vulnerabilities and write those up. But many consulting companies for the sort of lower-end security services actually forbid the consultants running the scans. They tell them don't do any post-exploitation at all. Often maybe they're scanning live systems. They don't want to risk knocking anything down. And, for the service they're offering, in that context, it's fine just to say, oh, there's a vuln here, fix it. We don't need to really fully go down the rabbit hole of how bad this is if it's exploited. So that, they could have, in their terms of engagement, it literally says no post-exploitation at all. Well, that's really doing yourself a disservice as a learning hacker. Because post-exploitation, in real-world scenarios, any real exploit now requires multiple hops. You're going to have to do not just one thing, but probably several things, and achieve multiple intermediate objectives to finally get all the way, to rooting the last system that you need to root. And to that end, I wanted to just highlight some really excellent resources for privilege escalation on both the Windows and the Linux platform. So the first thing I wanted to call attention to was the first site was LOLBAS, LOLBAS. And you can find that on GitHub at the lolbas-project. And that stands for Living Off the Land, Binaries, and Scripts. And this is actually just a site that makes an encyclopedia-like listing for all of the binaries that exist on Windows, and sort of like what capabilities they give you as an attacker. And why this is interesting is that if you come across during an actual pen test, you can come across something like Carbon Black or Bit9 or something that enforces the whitelisting of binaries on a system. So you may not be able to actually run an arbitrary payload if it doesn't exist on the whitelist. And the LOLBAS site, it's available at lolbas-project.github.io, has an excellent reference for all of the existing binaries on the Windows system, and which ones can let you do code execution, which ones you can use to download things from the internet, and the most interesting ones, there are pathways to compiling arbitrary C# code, even on a system that only allows whitelisted binaries. You can compile arbitrary C# code and then get it to run. Even if it doesn't allow running binaries that aren't on the whitelist, since the things listed in LOLBAS are part of the Windows system, they are always whitelisted. Many of the most interesting things like install-util.exe and the C# compiler csc.exe are part of the .NET system. And since .NET has been required in Windows for, years and years, they can't really be easily removed. And so you can count on these things being present and giving you ways of bypassing AV and escalating privilege on Windows systems. So the second site I want to call attention to is a very similar site, but for Linux, or for Unix too, because it focuses on sudo quite a bit. But it's gtfobins.github.io is the Unix equivalent of lolbas. And this has, for example, the first time you land on a Unix system, if you do an ID and it says your deploy, then you do sudo ID and it says your root, cool, you're done, right? But if things aren't that easy, you do an ID, it says deploy, cool. You do a sudo ID, it asks you for a password, uh-oh. Well, sometimes you can do something like a sudo-l, although that can be disabled, and that'll list all of the explicitly whitelisted rules in sudo. And then basically what you do is if any of the commands you see in the GTFO bins site are things that are whitelisted for you in sudo, like passwordless sudo, you might be able to use these to escalate to root. So one popular example, because it's a security tool, is Nmap. So Nmap actually has a -- interactive command, or it had. They removed it until version 5.2. So if you land on a system that has an old version of Nmap and it's explicitly whitelisted in sudo, which is common because Nmap works much better when you're root. You can actually use that to pop a root shell. Using the instructions, I won't read them out here, but the explicit instructions to do that you can find on the GTFO bin site. So I just wanted to highlight that privilege escalation is something a lot of people don't talk about, and it turns out there are really, really excellent resources on the web that really kind of bind together like everything everyone has learned or published on a lot of these topics, and really easy to use reference formats. I was unfortunately unaware of these sites until a few months ago, and I found them to be I'm going to say life altering. And with that, we're going to go to our closer, Daniel, for the final hacking tips.
I'm going to reinforce both from my rant and the follow-up statements that were made by Max. My hacking tip for the day is read your fucking specs. Really, read your fucking specs. Get on RFC, get on IETF, get on W3C. Read what the specifications are. Read what the engineers are actually building libraries to meet. Understand those mechanisms inside and out. It'll make your life 10 times better.
Can I say something to that? I'm currently reading RFC 6797, which is on HTST, the new hypertext secure transport.
Yep.
I'm doing that right now, making my way through it.
Absolutely.
I've spent a lot of time reading RFCs, and in fact, implementing things from RFCs.
Yep.
So I remember, some of my best learning projects early on. We were trying to implement an IRC client from just from reading RFCs. So RFCs, if people don't know, it stands for request for comments. They are typically numbered. And there is an RFC for every kind of protocol there is on the internet. So you can find a full specification of how the protocol is supposed to work. And Appendix A always has some sweet ASCII art of what the each packet of the protocol looks like. I remember one other fun project I saw at one point is someone tried to make an ASCII art parser for Appendix A of RFCs, so that they could try and automatically fuzz a protocol based on reading the ASCII art description.
Bless
amazing.
them.
Yeah.
Bless that person.
RFCs
That's amazing.
are super, super valuable, and you can find them easily on the internet in text file format. So, any final burning comments? No? All right. Well, that does it for our first episode. Thank you for listening to the Hack the Planet podcast, and let us know what you think by leaving a message at the Hacker Helpline at 206-486-6272. Once again, that's 206-486-6272, or email podcast@symbolcrash.com. And remember, hacking isn't just a crime, it's a survival trade.